Howdy doody, my name is Susie, and today I thought I would share with you my latest project, not brain surgery, just a little simple tissue cover for my tissue box, and it's made of fabric and it's monogrammed. And I had seen these online selling for $58, and they were, the monogram was actually an embroidered monogram, which looked very nice. But these look really nice too, and they fit into my decor. So this is what I did. The pattern that I'm showing you today is for the cube tissue as opposed to the rectangular tissue, but I'll show you how to make the stencil, and then depending on the size of the tissue box that you normally buy, you can adapt it to that. So all we're going to need is we're going to need some fabric, and to make a tissue box you're only going to need a piece of fabric that's about 13 by 20 inches and some fusible liner. You're also going to need some scissors, of course, some fusible tape, a little ripper, some pins, your tape measure, and then if you want to add the monogram, which I actually bought the monogram but I just haven't received them yet, I decided to just make them out of some stiff starched felt, and that's how I got these. So I'll show you how to do that as well in case you want to make them the same way. So all I did was I took my tissue box, put it on a piece of paper, traced it out, and added 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now believe it or not, this is not a perfect cube. One side is actually 4.5 inches while the other side is 4.25 inches. So it's slightly off, but I've made my pattern to fit a perfect cube, and that just allows for a little extra space. That's fine because it's going over your Kleenex box. So I cut out my pattern, and I'll attach the pattern to the video in case you have the exact same box as I do. And I cut out my pattern. There's essentially 3 pieces. One of the pieces is for the 4 sides. The other piece is for the top. And the third template is for the underside of the top. Because we're going to be creating this opening, I'm going to show you how to sew these 2 pieces together, and when you flip them inside out, it will give you a perfectly seamed opening that's lined on the inside. So first things first, I got my fabric. And I've done this 2 different ways. If you're using vintage linens, then you can take advantage of the finished edge as your hem, and you wouldn't have to create a new hem. But if you're using new fabric, this is where you're going to need your 13 by 20 piece of fabric, and you're going to need, and I'm using ultralight fusible interfacing because you just want to give the fabric some body, especially if you're using those vintage linens. They can be a little bit flimsy. And I cut out both pieces at the same time, and I just found that this is much easier to work with this way. So I've got my piece, it's 13 by 20. I added my fusible interface to the top, and I went ahead and fused it together. But first, I did press my fabric to make sure it was perfectly smooth before adding the interface. So I'm just going to go over to the iron, and I'm going to iron the interface on now. So while the iron is heating, I did take advantage of some vintage linens to create one of my boxes, and I went ahead and did the infusing on the entire piece of fabric before cutting it out, cutting out the pattern. It really helps a lot. And this is what I meant about taking advantage of the finished edge instead of creating a hem. This just means that the placement of your pattern is going to overhang a little bit to compensate for the extra hem. So all we have to do, all we want to do is make sure that we press our fabric. This is the fabric that I'm using, and it's a little bit loud, so I'm liking the back side of the fabric. So the back side of the fabric is going to be my good side. The pattern side is going to be on the inside. Is make sure I've got the right side down. And then I just start from the center out, and I just give it some light sweeps to prevent any wrinkles. So now I've just got it to tack down. It can still lift up. It's not perfectly fused yet, but now that it's tacked down, I'm going to go ahead and trim off that extra fusible lining because I don't want it to stick to my ironing board. So I just trim off the extra fusible webbing. Now I turn it over on the fabric side, and now I'm going to really heat set it so that it adheres, it fuses with my fabric. Now I already know that all I have to do is I'm going to fold this lengthwise. So I have my side pattern, and I'm going to need 4 of these. My fabric is doubled right now, and I'm only going to cut 2 pieces at a time, just so that I make it more even. There's for 2. So now I've got my other 2 patterns that I have to cut out. This piece is actually the inside of this piece. So if you look at this stencil, this fits on the inside. It's exactly the same. So I have my pattern piece, and just by the way, if you are new to sewing or you need a little bit of guidance, all the seam allowances are 1/2 inch. So I've just marked it off 1/2 inch from the needle to the edge of the green tape, and that's going to help me line up all of my seams. But we're not using that right now. So all we're going to do is we're going to start the corner, and we're going to sew right through the paper. It's going to become perforated, and then we'll be able to remove it. Line it up at the corner. Take your time. Turn. Corner. Turn. And this is where I'll do a lock stitch. And you're just going to tear it away. And it tears away pretty easily because it is perforated. Before you remove the center of the pattern, and you see how you've got the 2 layers attached, you're going to take your seam ripper, and you want to start off a little hole, creating a little hole, because we're going to use our scissors. We're going to cut this line here, and then we're going to cut these 2 side lines. So you're using the seam ripper to cut all the way through your fabric. You want to cut it to the edge, but not through your stitch. Now we've cut the opening, and it's cut all the way through. You want to remove the paper, and it pulls off pretty easily, but if you're going to put any kind of, you just want to do it gently and just let the paper tear off. Now we have our piece with the smaller piece on the inside, and we have the slit. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this fabric and we're going to push it through the hole, and we're going to pull it through the other side. This didn't cut all the way through. So if you have a little bit of a snag, just make sure you're cutting it right to that corner, as close to the corner as you can get without cutting the stitch. Comes out on the opposite side, and you're going to get something like this. And now we need to press this. And once you press it, you'll have something like this. This is the outside of the box. This is the inside of the box. Now you can see that I've left the seams because I didn't want to bulk up the corners when we sew the sides together. But in order to make this stay in place, I'm just going to use some fusible tape to hold it in. So now we've fused this together, and look at how perfect the edge is. So the next step is to take our sides and there's a bottom and a top, and we just want to keep it consistent so all the pieces are exactly the same. And we're essentially going to create a cross. We're going to take our piece and we're going to put right sides together, line up our piece, and then we're just going to pin it along here. So we're going to sew this, and once we sew it, we'll have it joined this way. So if you have your monogram, now is a good time to apply it, whether it's self-adhesive or if you're going to make your own monogram. Apply it to one of the sides of the box. Now is the easiest time to do it. So I've pinned the top to one of the sides, and we're going to sew along here and create this. So I start off by doing the two opposite sides, and then I do the other two. So I've pinned one side and the other, and once they're sewn, they're going to be like this, and then I'm going to come back and add the other two sides. So I've pinned the other two sides, and you can see once I sew it together, I'm going to get this. Don't want to sew this side. So we've sewn the four top pieces together, and now we want to create a cube. So now we want to do the same thing. We're going to sew along the sides, and this is going to create our cube. Flatten it out and sew along the seam from notch to notch. This is going to be our hem. Do that all the way around. So maybe at this point you want to double check and make sure you've got the correct height for your tissue box, or you can just go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and press my seam so it's easier to sew. So your seam is pressed flat, and then before sewing your hem, just pop that seam inside your hem, and now you can sew this and it'll make it nice and neat. So now I've pressed all the seams, and you just want to turn it inside out, and you just want to fix those little corners like that. And at this time, you can take it and just press it all the sides so that you get a nice crisp box. There. Now we have a nice cube. All we have to do is add our tissue. So as you can see, here are my Kleenex boxes, and I think they look really cute, and they'll look really nice in all of their designated rooms, color matching the decor. And if you're like me and you don't want to wait to order the embroidered monograms, you can certainly make your own monograms with felt. And this is reinforced felt. It's either stiffened with starch, or it has some sort of backing, but it's not the regular soft felt. This makes it much easier to cut. And then I picked my favorite font on my computer. I created a text box, I added my font, picked the size, and then I flipped the text box horizontally, which gave me a reverse R. So I reversed that and I printed it. Then I cut out the print. And then I used the glue stick to adhere my cutout letter onto my actual felt. I cut out the felt so that it was more manageable for me to cut. And then I went ahead with a small pair of scissors and intricately cut out my letter. Now some letters are going to be easier than others depending on the font. So I cut it out, and then I was able to peel away the paper quite easily because I hadn't let it sit to dry. From here, all I did was, by using some fabric glue, I adhered it to the front, and it looks great. So let me show you some examples. So if you try this and you like it, I hope that you share it. If you'd like to see more content, I hope you subscribe. Until then, keep your tissues handy.